The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom tells a very unique story that's based on the founding of Hyrule and the very first king and queen and how Hyrule came to be. But it definitely conflicts with different games in the series and does make a lot of us scratch our head as to what the heck is even going on at this point. Are the timelines even more messed up? Is this a game that's actually bringing the timelines together? Well, there's a lot of theories out there as to how this game actually fits as a perfect puzzle piece, but I don't think that's exactly what it does. There might be different ways for us to interpret how this timeline works now, and today I'm gonna try my best to explain what I think could actually be going on in Tears of the Kingdom. Now, of course, it's almost impossible to say for certain right now, as it's still way too early to make exact predictions as to what is happening, but right now I can make some educated guesses, so if you have any theories of your own, make sure you comment them down below, and maybe I can do a separate video talking about how you guys came up with a better solution. But without further ado, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Zelda and Nintendo, and also make sure that you subscribe if you're watching right now, because a lot of you guys are not subscribed. Let's help move this bar up even more. You guys have been doing such a great job. Let's keep it rolling. But let's get into the video. Also, fair reminder, this is talking about the flashback sequences and where they take place in the timeline. As we know, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are at the end of the current timeline. Now, let's jump into the video. So to understand exactly what's going on here, we need a quick story recap. So Link and Zelda at the very beginning of the game go to investigate where all this malice / gloom is coming from, and they find that it's coming from underneath the castle, deep underground, where they also find ruins of a civilization known as the Zonai. Down below, they find an imprisoned corpse, which we know as Ganondorf, and they find a hand that was imprisoning Ganondorf eventually dissipates, dropping a magical stone on the ground, which is a magical tear, which is a secret stone, which we'll get into in a second. This stone actually ends up saving Zelda as she falls to her death, as it teleports her back through time, and Link is saved by the actual hand of the Zonai creature, which is King Rauru. Zelda finds herself thrown into the distant past, where she's trying to work with the first king and queen of Hyrule, being Queen Sonia and King Rauru, in order to get back to her present time. But this is where we start to get some interesting information. These two are the founders of Hyrule, which means they are the ones that started the kingdom, the castle, everything that we know within the Hyrule lineage. How did this happen, and how does this compare with Skyward Sword? Well, Skyward Sword tells us that it wasn't Hylians but humans that thrived on the land, until evil started to pursue all over the land. The goddess Hylia brought them up into the clouds, into the skies, to protect them from the evil down below, and there the humans lived in the skies until it was safe to come down, and the goddess Hylia battled against Demise in order to imprison both of them to keep the humans safe in the sky. The goddess Hylia would be reincarnated into a young girl named Zelda over and over again, and of course we know that ancient evil would also be reincarnated. We know this adventure takes Link around the world and also the Sky Islands of Skyloft in order to power up the Goddess Blade, which is the Master Sword, in order to save Princess Zelda and defeat the evil of Demise. But we know at the end of the game, Link comes face to face with Demise, where he has to battle him, and he plunges the Master Sword into his chest, where the remnants of the evil is imbued into the sword and sealed away. But before he passes, Demise does place a curse on the bloodline, stating, "My hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again. Those like you, those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, they are eternally bound to this curse. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all time." And this is how we get a constant cycle of evil that plagues the kingdom and plagues Link and Zelda through generations to come, whether it be in the form of Ganon, Demise, or whatever evil entity appears within that timeline. At the end of the game, Skyloft is brought to the ground, and Link and Zelda discuss their future plans to make the kingdom of Hyrule. So Skyward Sword obviously states that this is how Hyrule is being formed. This is how it all started. So obviously there's some complications and conflictions with what's happening in Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom talks about a race known as the Zonai, who are close with the gods, that came down to the surface world in order to live with the Hylians. Now, I have some theories regarding this and the Zonai as well, because we'd ever really heard of anything about the Zonai or some other high race that lived in the clouds and were close with the gods. So this is definitely new news for all Zelda fans. But something I thought about was this kind of has to be right after the end of Skyward Sword. And to me, this also has to be when Link and Zelda also are no longer here. They must have passed, or something happened where they weren't on the Earth at this time. And I know some people feel like this could have taken place before Skyward Sword, but the Kingdom of Hyrule is already established here, so this kind of has to be after Skyward Sword, when Zelda told Link that she wanted to start a kingdom down below. This was going to be the new land which everybody lived in. So yes, this would have had to taken place after Link and Zelda had established that kingdom together. Something else I thought about was maybe humans didn't want to settle down into this new kingdom quite yet. They wanted to go back into the clouds and spend more time in their study and maybe even closer with the gods. And we did see Groose and his friends fly back up there, and maybe some of the humans stayed up there and didn't join the kingdom yet, where they then became the Zonai. Now, even after this game rolls the credits, we don't know much about the Zonai still. We just know that there's some type of higher being that live in the skies, and they have advanced technology as well. That's really all we know about them. They do share some similarities to the Hylians. They're this taller, darker skin, and longer ears. They still have long ears, they're just a lot longer than what we're used to. And they also have the addition of a third eye. So maybe the Skyloftians, or humans, turned into the Zonai after spending more time in the sky and later joined everybody else on the ground years later with their new technology and obviously their secret stones. But how did Rauru come down and wed Sonia to be the first king and queen of Hyrule? Shouldn't this kingdom already been established? Well, maybe not. Naturally, we would have expected Skyward Sword's Link and Zelda to be the first king and queens of Hyrule, but maybe they didn't form the kingdom right away. Maybe they just got everybody together, started making small villages or towns, and never really established a castle or kingdom at all. Maybe it was just a safe place for them to live and live freely from evil. So maybe there was never even a kingdom established after this. Maybe it was quite some time until eventually a future king and queen, being Rauru and Sonia, started working together in order to form the Kingdom of Hyrule. Once the Zonai came down and Rauru became king, he took Sonia, a Hylian, to be his wife, and maybe they used lots of their technology in order to build the castle and build different things around the castle in order to establish the kingdom itself. They built a safeguard and had tons of soldiers and protectors of the kingdom, and even made friends with all of the different races around the kingdom itself. Now, we know that Link and Zelda never became king and queens then from Skyward Sword, but we do know that Zelda in Tears of the Kingdom is a descendant of King Rauru and Queen Sonia, as she has both the light and time powers of both of them, making them her great grandparents. That means Zelda has always had Hylian and Zonai in her blood, along with the blood of the goddess. We know that goddess blood definitely didn't come from Rauru, as he was a descendant of the Zonai from the sky, and based on my theory, had stayed up into the Sky Islands for a very long time. That goddess blood must come from Sonia. Does that mean Sonia has some type of close relevance to the Zelda from Skyward Sword? Well, potentially. Queen Sonia and King Rauru never mention anything about a hero with a sword in their time or even a Zelda from their time. In fact, it's the first time they've ever heard of the name. But maybe there were no documents of Link and Zelda from Skyward Sword, so Sonia just didn't know much about it. But what if Zelda from Skyward Sword is actually the mother or grandmother or even great-great-great-grandmother of Queen Sonia? Maybe that's where some of that goddess blood is coming from, and eventually going down that timeline into Zelda's in every single game. Initially, I think the events of the flashbacks that we've seen in Tears of the Kingdom is following up years later after Skyward Sword. After Link and Zelda established a base on the ground and eventually passed on, eventually Rauru comes down and marries a descendant of Zelda, being Queen Sonia, who gets together and founds the Kingdom of Hyrule. Of course, we still have a theory on who the Zonai really are, and I want to dive into this concept of them actually still being Hylians evolved later on, because I think it makes a lot of sense when we dig into it. But of course, right now, we're just talking about the connection with Skyward Sword, and I believe that's the connection. Skyward Sword came first, and years later, the events of Tears of the Kingdom's flashbacks is what happened with the formation of Hyrule. Queen Sonia and King Rauru were technically, yes, the first king and queens of the established kingdom. I also just want to talk about a couple of references in the game itself from Skyward Sword. I mean, one thing that we see a lot is the Master Blade glowing and making that same chime that it did, knowing that Fi is still technically inside of the sword itself, showing that reference once again that Skyward Sword still happened. It was the formation of the blade, going from the Goddess Blade to the Master Sword. I mean, we even hear it talking to Zelda, and Zelda is able to understand exactly what it's saying, letting her know that Link is still alive and that Zelda has the power to heal the sword in her current timeline. Going back in time is the only way that they can get the sword back together for Link. But it just shows that Skyward Sword is being referenced here, so it doesn't just wipe that game from the timeline. I saw some people actually tried to say Nintendo was trying to wipe the events of Skyward Sword, and I just don't think that's the case, because there's some evidence that that game is still being referenced, even in Tears of the Kingdom. We also were hearing rumors about Skyward Sword coming to Switch for a very long time, and it actually took all the way until 2021, the summer of 2021 to be exact, when they finally released it, which felt like a good time frame right before Tears of the Kingdom, and I felt like they were kind of advertising each other. So yeah, I felt like Nintendo did want the public to play Skyward Sword before Tears of the Kingdom to get a better grasp of the story, which would make sense if they are referencing that game with the timeline. But of course, this is all speculation until we get some type of confirmation from Nintendo, and of course, more theories will pop up and more suggestions. But let me know in the comments down below what you think of this theory. Do you think Skyward Sword was just years before the events of Tears of the Kingdom's past? Let me know down below, and thank you so much for tuning in, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.